Hi, welcome to Lights Camera Author. I'm your host, Jim Juno, and I have with me today, he has a new book coming out. The author has a new book coming out in the first week in August. The author's name is Christopher Connelly, and his new book is Helen Morgan, the original torch singer and Ziegfeld's last star. Christopher, welcome to Lights Camera
Thank you.
Author. Now, Helen Morgan, I mean, this is a character who during her time, now depending on what source you're looking at, she either lived between 19, she either born in 1900 or 1902. It's kind of, is it fuzzy when she was born?
No, it's 1902.
It is 1902. Okay. Imagine Wikipedia having something wrong. Wow. I tell you. But she
Well,
was,
it's been wrong for about 80 years now, so it's not Wikipedia's fault in this case.
how did, now I got to ask you first off, I mean, this person was very big
Mhm.
during her time. And she was, I mean, she was in on Broadway. She was in films. She was, I mean, and she made over $1 million during her career, but it, but she wasn't able to save any of it, you know. So let's talk about Helen Morgan. First off, why is it wrong for 80 years when she was, I mean, when you found out it was 1902? What happened in that situation?
Uh, the um, the best plays of 1928 was published, I guess in early 29, and it listed her year of birth as 1900. I have no idea where they got that information, but that's been used as gospel ever since.
It's amazing. Usually people try to make themselves look younger.
Well, that's the thing. She was born in 1902. She later in life she claimed that she was born in 1904. So I have no idea where that 1900 birth year came from.
Amazing. Now, let's talk about her. She was a torch singer. And for those people out there who don't know nowadays what a torch singer is or was, can you please explain that to us?
Sure. A torch singer is a woman who sits on top of a piano and sings sad songs about how she loves her man, but he's not the best catch in the sea, and she loves him anyway.
So very simple. I mean, and the last time I can remember a singer, or so to speak, on a piano was a couple of decades ago with Connie Chung on saying goodbye on her show. She climbed up on the piano and started singing. Well, I guess the Fabulous Baker Boys, the movie. Uh, I want to say, was it who was it? It was
Michelle Pfeiffer, I think.
Michelle Pfeiffer. Yes, Catwoman. Yeah, she was played a torch singer in that. So for those of you who with newer movies want to see a torch singer, Fabulous Baker Boys is probably a good example of it. But she was, I mean, she got her start. Well, I mean, her early life was hectic, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I mean, let's talk about her growing up. I mean, her father was a farmer in Illinois, and was he arrested? Was he? I mean, he wasn't a upstanding citizen.
No, Helen's mother was married 6 times, I believe.
Six
Um,
times. My
yeah,
gosh.
and most of the men she married were not the best of men. um, but yeah, she was actually when she became pregnant with Helen, her first husband divorced her. So Lulu, her name was. She was primarily a single mom. But back in those days, if you wanted to have relations with someone, you had to marry them. So every time she wanted to have relations, she married, and
Right.
then things usually went south, and she would divorce, and she would marry again.
So, so and like her father was he? I go back again. Was she arrested? Not she was, but he was arrested too, wasn't he?
Yes. Well, her stepfather was arrested. No,
Stepfather.
actually, both were arrested. Her biological father got he was also an alcoholic, among other things, and had a meltdown, a domestic abuse situation. The police came in, and so he was arrested and um, underwent the Keeley cure for alcoholism, and that seemed to help at least for a while. This was long after Helen was out of the picture.
Mhm.
But her stepfather, when uh, he and her mother separated, he got into a brawl in a saloon, and the guy he was fighting, he died of a fractured skull, and
Oh
he
my gosh.
arrested and charged and convicted of manslaughter, and spent a couple of years in jail.
You know, her and saloons seem to go together throughout her entire career, doesn't it?
Yes.
You know, I mean, that's where she got her start, performing in what was known as not well as nightclubs, but illegal. They were illegal speakeasies because it was
Well,
very,
they were higher end speakeasies, but yes, they were speakeasies.
yeah. It was and people forget it was a time of prohibition, wasn't it?
Yes.
So she's performing underage, by the way, um, in an illegal establishment. Um, but she doesn't. I mean, uh, they were high-end speakeasies, and they catered to a high-end crowd, and that's where she was spotted, I believe, or that you wrote about.
Uh,
What?
yes. Her big benefactor was a woman named Amy Leslie. She was a reporter in Chicago, and she took her Helen under her wing and uh, wrote paragraph after paragraph after paragraph praising her, and then wrote letters of introduction to Lawrence Ziegfeld and George White and some other folks in New York, and basically told her, okay, it's time for you to spread your wings and uh, go up the next rung on the ladder, and that's what she did.
And you know, George I'm sorry, Flo Ziegfeld. Um, was he the first one to spot her? But he was not impressed with her voice at the time.
That's correct.
You know,
Yeah, yeah. She auditioned for him. Actually, she worked for him twice before he cast her in Showboat. She went out on the last year of Sally on tour in 1923 into 24. And then in early 1925, she was in the chorus of Louis the 14th, which was a Leon Arrow vehicle. And in the chorus of that show with her was Louise Brooks and Peggy Fears.
wow. So she had some big heavyweight people performing with her, didn't she? You know, now what came first? Was it the play Applause, or or Applause led to Showboat, correct?
No, no, the other way around.
The other way around. Okay. So Showboat led to Applause, which was a big success on Broadway.
No, no, that Applause was a film.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting my notes mixed up here. It's hard when you got plays and films and stuff in front of you and stuff.
Yeah, she was everywhere. She did everything. But
Yeah.
yes, and back to back to back, she was in Showboat on Broadway. Then in like a 6 or 8 week window, she filmed Applause, and then and she wrapped on a Friday, and then Monday morning she started rehearsals for Sweet Adeline, which was also a Kern and Hammerstein musical on Broadway. And that's pretty much where her reputation is built, on those three um,
And
pieces.
and then was she still performing at night in nightclubs during that time?
While she was in Showboat, yes.
While she was in Showboat. So she was in demand, and and I imagine she was getting paid quite a lot, not a bad of money during that time.
Yeah, she was making a boatload of money, yes.
But she was never, was she happy doing, what was she happy doing? Plays or singing in nightclubs or being, I mean, I imagine she didn't fit too well in films.
Um, Hollywood really didn't know what to do with her. Um, as I by the time she had these three successes, um, you know, she was really pigeonholed into this dramatic singing actor. And there wasn't a whole lot of that in Hollywood. Um, and musicals were generally fluff, and they so they really didn't know what to do with her. And also she was a little bit older by the time she made Applause. And on stage you can look young for a very long time. On film, you really need some help behind the camera, and she didn't get that until later in her career.
I did notice that in the photos of that. I was thinking this photo is supposed to be like from 1935, 1936, which would make her like around 30, 33 to 30, 34 or something like that. And I'm like, this person looks much younger.
Yeah.
So she had a good makeup person, I guess, when she was on stage. Um, when she was on stage, was it George White who spotted her?
George White gave her, yeah, she made her debut on Broadway in the George White Scandals of 1925. That was her debut.
And that was, yeah. So she's had success at the scandal. And for those of you out there who want to find out about George White, he made a couple of movies too later on. I think it was the Scandals of 1936 and Scandals of 1945 or something like that, back in the 30s and 40s. But was that before Showboat?
Yes, that was her debut. That was 1925.
25. And while she's performing with George White's Scandal, um, Flo Ziegfeld spots her again, correct?
It was a little later.
A little later, but he doesn't remember her.
He did not remember her when she ended up on his radar for Showboat.
Right. And yeah, because I remember for some reason, I want to say when he first saw her, his comment was, "You should stick to nightclubs."
Uh,
He was not impressed with her singing voice.
not very, yeah, she was kind of an odd duck, as I said. Um, she was tall for her age, for her time, but she wasn't showgirl tall. And she sang very well. She danced. She started out as a dancer. Um, but again, Ziegfeld didn't, he saw all these beautiful women, very talented women, and it didn't click with him. He didn't say it.
And eventually, she became a star on his show. And that was near the end of his career on Broadway.
Yes.
But eventually, she became a star, like you said, in Showboat. But she also, she got mixed up with was it a gangster named Billy Rose? And did I use that term correctly? Billy Rose.
No, no, Billy Rose was not a
No,
gangster.
no, I mean not a gangster, but a nightclub owner.
He was a nightclub owner.
That's
Yes.
what I associate those two in Chicago. But yeah, he was a nightclub owner, and she got um backstreet, that's great, backstage club.
Yes.
The,
That was her first nightclub in New York.
and
And
that
that was her first real watershed moment.
that was when she started drinking, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Working in a nightclub, particularly if you're an attractive young woman, part of your job was to, when you were done singing or doing your act, you would mingle with the guests. And, any gentleman would certainly buy the young lady a drink. And so, that was the game. And that was what she was doing. And she started drinking more. She was honest enough that she wasn't going to, get a mocktail
Hmm.
and charge them, the full price for alcohol. So she started drinking, and she liked it. It was the Prohibition era, so drinking was uh, kind of an act of civil disobedience as well.
Yeah, smoking and drinking, I imagine, was very prevalent in those clubs.
Yes.
And she liked it so much that she started opening. She was so successful too that she was able to open her own club eventually.
Yeah, she four clubs bore her name, had her name above the door.
Hmm. But yeah,
Well,
Shane.
she was primarily an entertainer. She sold her the use of her name, and of course she was a hostess, and again spent even more time with the customers. But she was she wasn't really involved in the day-to-day operations of most of the clubs.
But the police raided her.
They
Not
raided
one,
her several times. Yes.
yeah. One time she even got indicted.
Uh, yes. Yeah. One time she actually was indicted, stood trial, and with it by the letter of the law, as it was written, she was guilty of sin, and she was acquitted. The the jurors just they were tired of prohibition themselves. It was right after the St. Valentine's Day massacre in Chicago, and it was very clear by 1929 that this was not working and never would work. And at least for the people in the cities, they're like, we're done.
It's funny you mentioned that the St. Valentine's Day massacre because in Chicago especially, what we have seen and been exposed to in movies, such as like say The Untouchables or some other movies set in Prohibition era Chicago, owning a nightclub or operating a nightclub could have been a dangerous profession, couldn't it?
Very dangerous.
She did she always want to be a club owner or so I mean I guess she made a lot of money selling her name to be put
Uh,
on top of it.
she that was her career. That was what was getting her notice. So yeah, she was. Um,
But was she targeted?
I'm sorry.
Was she targeted?
She was targeted. By the by 1928, she was one of the most famous women in New York, uh, second only to Texas Guinan as the queen of New York nightclubs. And so, yeah, the prohibition agents they absolutely wanted to put both of them away. That would the day that she was arrested was the arraigned, I guess, was the first and only time that she was in the leadoff story on the New York Times
Front page.
front page.
Wow. And see, that's how famous this woman was, that she can make front page news in the
Uh,
New York Times. And of course, the drinking eventually got worse. When did it begin to really get out of hand for her?
After Ziegfeld died, she went into a tailspin. He was really her father, because all the daddies that her mother had brought home, they didn't stay long. And Ziegfeld was in many ways her spiritual father, and she never stopped mourning him.
Really, my gosh. And yeah, eventually she died at age 39 then.
That's correct.
And was it news when she passed away? Because I mean,
Oh, it's huge news.
was it huge news during that time, really? Because I remember, I think she was like one of the few people who had the same role in the first movie, Showboat, 1929, and then in the remix, right? That's good,
Oh, the
remake,
remix, I guess you could call
the
it.
remix. That's like the remake in 1936. Now I haven't seen these two editions of it. I've seen the later version of Showboat, but she played Julie in 1929, and then 7 years later, she played Julie again.
Right.
And she sang the same songs. And you can find these songs on YouTube. You can find her singing Bill, I believe was her big hit.
Yes.
And Nothing's Gonna Stop Me from Loving That Man was the other big song from that musical. Um, so she was still trying to find a place in movies. I think the last remake of Showboat before she passed away. That was her final film appearance, wasn't it?
Yes.
So how did you get interested in Helen Morgan?
When I was a teenager, back when libraries had books on shelves, I would go in and I would find the section that interests me. In this case, musical theater, and I would just go down the shelves and shelf by shelf and pick out books and look at them. And I picked up the World of Musical Comedy by Stanley Green and was reading about Showboat. And like you, I first encountered Showboat by seeing the MGM remake from the 50s. And I was reading that this Helen Morgan, who created the role of Julie, she was this had a plaintive soprano voice. And I thought to myself, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever read in my life. Julie is a broad. I mean, she should be, a contralto to be a point of contrast with Magnolia, because Magnolia is the soprano. And then I heard a recording, and that changed everything. It changed the entire character. So instead of being, this broad, she was this tragic figure. And I just, started learning more and more and more about her, and everything I could, every recording I could find.
I was going to say, how hard is it finding recordings of her now? Well, nowadays it's a little bit easier with the internet because I did some searches today on, and I found like several recordings of her, especially of Bill and what was the other hit? Not Bill, not nothing's gonna stop me from loving that man, but oh gosh, let's see, what did I
Why
do?
Was I Born? Don't Ever Leave Me.
Uh, Don't Ever Leave Me was yeah. Let's see. Yeah, she that was one that you can find a lot online, and so but Bill, I think, is the one that people will see a lot when they Google her name.
Yes.
You know, she died at age 41. We mentioned that young age. That was because, was it cirrhosis of the liver?
That's
Because the
correct.
drinking had done such damage to her. She was married 4 times,
Yes.
which was she always trying to find? Did she want to have a man take care of her? Is that what she was trying to do? Or but you call her a
That was that's what you did back then. She was in and I think part of what fueled the alcoholism was she felt like she was between a rock and a hard place, because she was um, providing for her mother and helping everybody, but financial support for her family, her extended family, and and she knew that if she stopped working, then the money would stop coming in. So
you
marrying, she could marry a man who could, give her a comfortable life, but then what do you do with everybody else?
right?
And she had this sense of responsibility for all these people that she helped.
You call her a proto-feminist in your
Yes,
book. Now I know what a feminist is, and I take it that a prototype is like the first edition of an
right.
of a thing, But so you say she was the first feminist
No,
in
no. But she certainly had feminist leading. She was certainly very much a career person, um, very much taking care of women, pregnant women, would give them support. Um, Really, she helped everybody.
Mhm. She also had a movie made about her life called The Helen Morgan Story. And now I know Polly Bergen in the film version of it, because there was also a TV version of
Right,
it,
right. Polly Bergen was in the TV version,
right? And she won an Emmy for it.
and she won an Emmy for it. And then Anne Blythe was in the
And
film.
Blythe. Have you seen those?
I have.
Do you think they're accurate?
Um, as accurate as they could be. The problem was, the men in her life were still alive, and so they were very much afraid of libel. So all the men in both versions are pieces of fiction.
Oh yeah.
The TV version is a little bit better. Well, I mean, it's a very good live TV program, but it's a little more historically accurate, although it's sort of uh, with the format of 10-minute acts or so, between commercials.
Yeah.
It's ends up being sort of like a checklist. It's like, okay, here is Helen, how she first climbed on top of a piano. This is how Helen got into showbiz. This is how Helen, helped out a young mother with and adopted a child. This is one of her failed marriages. It's like, and then we come back from the break, and then we get on to the next chapter.
That doesn't sound too bad. I mean, yeah, and they were constrained by the censorship rules of the era. You couldn't show somebody being a total alcoholic, I guess, not even in movies that dealt with
Uh,
alcoholism.
no, the Warner Brothers film actually, they went a little over the top in terms of showing the alcoholism.
And they
Uh,
made more of it.
they made more, but yeah, the poor Anne Blythe, she ends up in Bellevue and getting I think shock treatment.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
no, she's having no, maybe not shock treatment, but she's having DTs, and it's, I mean, it's more Neely O'Hara than it is Helen Morgan. I mean, none of that happened to her.
What's your next project?
Thinking of a couple of things. I'd like to do a study of the films of Carl Laemmle Jr.
Carl Emily?
Carl Laemmle, yeah. So he was the young son of the founder of Universal
Hmm.
Pictures,
He was
and
responsible for Dracula and Frankenstein.
and everything. I'm really a very varied and very interesting body of work. And then um, Universal, the Lend-Lease lost Universal around the time that that second Showboat came out, and he never worked again. But that's 6, 7 years, from All Quiet on the Western Front and The King of Jazz to Showboat. It's a remarkable filmography, and I don't think he's gotten the attention that he deserves.
That's true. Well, I tell you what, the author is Christopher Connelly, and the book is Helen Morgan, the original torch singer, and Ziegfeld's Last Star. Christopher, I really want to thank you for being on Lights Camera Author tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.